Few things are for sure in this life, but this is. If we live for any substantial amount of time, we will encounter grief due to the loss of a loved one. Not something any of us ever want, and we all handle it differently. This podcast is to feature those who have done purposeful and meaningful things through their grief. These people featured on here are normal folks, just like you and me, who were thrust into a place they never wanted to be in their lives. A painful place. As they move through their pain, they realize that something worthwhile, something for the greater good could come out of the unthinkable. I'm sure that none of them would ever consider themselves to be a hero, but when I searched the definition of the word hero, I found this: a person who is admired or idolized for courage, outstanding achievements, or noble qualities. And that fit. And so it's my privilege to bring you the remarkable stories of these heroes in grief. Hi, everyone. This is Tom, your host for the Heroes in Grief podcast, and the response has been incredible so far, and I want to thank you for that. It's getting out to people, and they're letting us know that it's helping them, and that is what it's all about. I want to make you aware of a way that you can support this podcast without having to spend 1 cent, and that is through affiliate marketing. I've set up affiliate marketing for online shopping. If you do online shopping, then I have links to all the major retailers, most of them anyways, and I can provide them for you so that when you buy online through those links, you'll help support the podcast through the percentages that we get. It doesn't cost you anything more. You just shop like you regularly would on the sites that you love. It's very easy. All you have to do is shop. And that's it. Just let me know the links to the places that you want to shop at, and I will provide the affiliate links so that you can do it. If you want more information on this, you can go to heroesandgrief.com. It takes you to the Linktree page where a video explains it in a little more detail. But you can always email me at tom@heroesandgrief.com, and I can answer questions for you. But you can support the podcast that way, and it's very easy, very simple, and it doesn't cost you a cent. Isn't that great? Thank you. Now here's today's episode. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Heroes in Grief podcast. Once again, great to have you with us today. And today I have Jennifer Landon. Jennifer is a certified grief educator and coach, a construction suicide prevention trainer, and leadership facilitator. And she runs the site yourgriefmatters.co, not com, C-O. And I see how you put that on there sometimes too. So how you doing today, Jennifer?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
Good, good, good. You're in New Hampshire, right? Manchester, New Hampshire?
Correct.
All right. For anybody local to you around there, they can know where to find you. But we met, I believe, on LinkedIn, right? Is that the first place we met?
Yeah.
So.
Yep. I saw you on LinkedIn.
In the grief travels.
Yes.
So you expressed your interest, and I'm glad to have you on here with us today. Jennifer, we start always with the grief story, or the story that got you motivated to do what you do today, and so, or along the way even. So if you'd like to start there, why don't you tell us, well, and you can tell us a little bit about yourself as well, and then maybe get into the grief story.
Sure,
all right?
Sure. I think what I'd like to do is just jump right into the grief story because there is a little bit of background history here. I had worked for a local university, and there was a class trip going to Greece. I signed up to be one of the chaperones, and I got there and was roommates with another colleague from the university. We knew each other as associates, but really didn't work closely together during that time. And, you know, when you're spending a week with somebody that you don't know, it can go one way or the other, right? It worked out great. So my friend Sue, she and I roomed together in Greece. We had a great time, and our friendship just kind of blossomed from there. After our trip to Greece, this was about 12 years ago, I left the university shortly after that and went on to do a couple of other things. And Sue and I would get together on occasion and, have a Euro and a Greek beer and just kind of reminisce about our trip together. Well, fast forward, I started working for a construction industry association, and part of my responsibility was to facilitate this Future Leaders in Construction program. And we needed to hire somebody to serve as our business consultant to help co-facilitate this. And I thought, well, I'll call Sue and see if she knows anyone or if she's interested. Sue was interested. So in addition to being a full-time college professor, she's also a business consultant. So we spent the next 6 years collaborating on this Future Leaders in Construction program. And our relationship just continued to blossom. And then she said a couple years ago, she said, I'm going to be looking into retirement. So I think it's time that I stop teaching with you and let's bring in somebody else. So introduce Sophia. And the three of us had a planning retreat and to figure out what this was going to look like moving forward. And that was in June of 2022. A couple days after our retreat, Sophia sends me a message. It came in early in the morning and it just said, give me a call when you get this. Well, I didn't think anything of it. And I called her and she said, Sue's son has died. Yeah. So that was the beginning. And I have to tell you that when I got that, of course, I didn't know how to react. I am grief avoidant, naturally, as I think so many people in our society are, right? I look back and think of all of these funerals that I didn't go to, all of the cards that I didn't send, all of the things that I did not do because it was my issue. Right? I didn't know how to deal with it. So I chose to do nothing. And I think that's a really common response.
Can I hold right there? It may seem simple to people, but could you just describe grief avoidant for the people out there, please?
Sure. I would say that it's the doing nothing. I don't know what to do, so therefore I'm going to do nothing because that's easier. And they're so consumed. So in my mind, I think about this one particular funeral that I didn't go to of a mentor of mine who I love dearly. And I look back at that and think, well, his wife isn't going to know that I wasn't there because he's so well loved. She's not going to miss me. I don't remember if I sent a card or not. And I never told the story of how much I loved him and appreciated him for everything that he did for me. So to me, that's being grief avoidant because it's my discomfort. In my discomfort, I choose to do nothing because choosing nothing is the better option than doing something that's going to make me feel uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you.
So that's kind of my definition of it. That's how I responded to grief previously. Sophia called me again and she said, I think you should go over and see Sue on Sunday. And I thought, I don't want any part of this, right? I don't want to go over. I'm thinking she's going to have family there. Who am I to go over? I mean, we're colleagues and yeah, we're friends, but who am I to go over and be part of this? I didn't even know her son, right? So this is the thought process that I'm going through. And again, it's my avoidance. It's not because I didn't want to. I just didn't know how to. So I took Sophia's advice and I went over. And obviously I'm glad that I did. And, Sue did have family there. There were other people there. And initially I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm being intrusive. They've got all family there and I'm not family. Like, why am I here? So these are all of the things that are going on. These are my issues, right? And here's Sue. She's appreciative that I'm there. She gives me a big hug. We go outside. She talks. She tells me, kind of what's going on. And it made me realize at that time that my issues are so minute compared to what she's got going on. Right? So her grief is like this. So my little insecurities, which is what it all boiled down to, was my insecurities. So this relationship that we have now, has kind of propelled into something different. So again, not knowing what to do, I thought, well, I'm just going to keep calling her and sending her texts and things, letting her know that I'm thinking of her because that's all I knew what to do. And so I continued to do that. And just for the listeners or viewers here, I think it's really important to understand that sending those texts, leaving those voice messages, the receiver will do with those what they want to, and don't ever expect a response. And that was one thing that I made sure that I never expected a response from Sue. So One of the conversations that we had, and just so you know, full disclosure, any stories that I tell, I have permission to share the stories. So one of the stories or one of the conversations we had was Sue said, I can't find good support. I need a counselor and I can't find anyone. They're either booking 6 months out or they're not returning my calls. Now, this was back in 2022, so we're just coming off the pandemic. The country's in a mental health crisis. All of these things are going on. So I was like, well, I don't know anything about this. So I started to do research. I was like, okay, I'm going to see if I know somebody who might be able to help her out. So I called friends who I knew were in therapy and, does your therapist do this kind of work? And I'm trying to send her resources and, connect her with people. I was sending her podcasts and Facebook groups and articles and anything and everything that I could think of to help support my friend. And that's when I happened upon a grief certification training program. I was like, well, what's this all about? So I looked into it and I thought, I'm not qualified to do this. I work in the construction sector. Like, who am I to be, looking into this? So I inquired just, on a hope that maybe I could do something with it. And it was not David Kessler's. Had I seen his, I probably would have done his as well. Initially, it was called From Grief to Gratitude. And I spoke with the founder and said, this is what I'm looking to do. I just want to help my friend. So I went through the program. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. I don't know why, but it just felt really private. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. I think, again, the insecurities kick in, right? Mm-hmm. I told my husband because I knew he would question why I had a big chunk of change coming out of our bank account. So I went through the program, and one of the things they required was a pro bono client. I talked to Sue, she agreed, etc. So that's how I started down the grief education support route. The second conversation that we had, which is really kind of what put me into a little bit of a different direction. I don't think that I ever really had the intention of being the grief support. I could do it. And, I've certainly had many, many conversations. But as far as being a grief supporter, grief coach, and getting paid for it, which is a valid thing, right? You want to be able to be paid for your services. It's certainly legitimate. I just didn't feel that that was my mission in this. So the second conversation we had was when she said, I can't go back to work. And I said, well, why? She said, it's going to be too difficult. Okay, why? Well, everybody knows my son. And she was a teacher, so she talked about her family all the time. And I knew of her family because we co-facilitated this leadership program together. And she's like, I'm not going to be able to go into the classes every day. I'm not going to be able to do this. Now, the university that she worked for, I do have to give them credit. They were extremely gracious. And they gave her a project to work on for the year that required her to go back on campus, but not every day and teach. So I kept trying to drill down on the why going back to work was so difficult. Again, not because I'm looking for some therapeutic breakthrough. I'm not a counselor, not a therapist, but really just like, why is going back to work so difficult? I didn't get it. I've not experienced this level of grief. And I think that that's where I'm an anomaly in this space, because everyone that I know that I follow, whether it's Facebook or LinkedIn, podcasts, videos, whatever, they all seem to have experienced this profound grief that has propelled them into doing this work to help support others. Mm-hmm. And I'm not there. I'm grateful for that. I've experienced my grief, but not that profound level of grief that so many others have. So I started to look into why is this so difficult? And Tom, the one word that just kept surfacing, whether it was in the research that I was doing or just in my own mind, it was awkward. Going back to work is awkward.
Yeah.
And I think it's awkward because we are a grief-avoidant society. We don't know how to handle it. We don't know what to do.
Very true. Before I forget, you felt like you didn't know what to do, but you did exactly what you're supposed to do. And I think it just came out of your love for Sue. That's simply it. You were there for her. You sent her favorable messages or links or whatever it might be, and unexpected. And that's a big part of it. That was important to say, because so many times, they didn't respond to me, so, these ridiculous things that people say and do, because of their own pride, probably. But, you did exactly what you're supposed to do and what somebody would want you to do. And so it's remarkable. And it's just out of love, because you didn't know, like you said, you hadn't been in that place before.
Yeah.
So,
it's
remarkable.
So, one of the other things that I learned was it's okay to mention the person. And, with that, what I'd like to do is to tell the story of what happened. This, you can kind of see my little picture here, right? This is Captain Nicholas Peter Losapio, United States Marine Corps. He and 4 other Marines lost their lives when their Swift 11, I think that was the name of the unit there, the Swift 11 Osprey helicopter crashed in a California desert during a military training accident. So that's, everything that I do, I now do in Nick's honor. And I never met Nick. I know of Nick because of all of the stories that I heard about him and his sister and, about Sue's husband in the leadership classes that we taught. So, it's kind of this, I think, again, this unusual space, so I'm doing all of this in honor of Nick to kind of keep Nick's memory alive and to help my friend Sue. Looking at this and, knowing that I do everything, in honor of Nick, I do the quote unquote sloppy, was his name in the military. And, he had quite a dynamic personality from what I understand. So I try to do things in his honor. Every presentation that I do, every time I talk about any one of the topics that I cover in my presentations, and I'll get to kind of the 4 areas that I cover, I always tell his story, because he's the reason that my life has taken a very different direction that I had no idea was ever within me. Again, I provide education and training for the construction sector. That's not anything to do with social work. I mean, I was a teacher for a while and did some other things, but this world is different. This whole grief world is different. So in doing this research on why grief is so awkward and going back to work, that led me kind of down a rabbit hole into other things. So I started to look into grief in the construction industry, right? We don't talk about that.
No way.
Right? No. Yep. We're not known for being, warm, fuzzy characters in this industry, right? So,
right.
This is more of a, suck it up, buttercup. You got stuff to do, right? Leave it at the door, leave it at home, right? We don't talk about it. And it doesn't matter what you're experiencing. So as I'm looking into this and I'm doing the research on it, it's like organizations on average offer 3 to 5 business days.
Yep. Absurd.
How are you supposed to go back to work and perform at all, number one, but be expected to perform at 100%? Like, how do you do that? And especially when you look at the type of loss, right? And that's the other thing that started to blow me away. It's like, 3 days or 5 days for immediate family members, including, spouse, child, parents, might include, grandparents in there. But anything else is, lesser. So you might get 3 days. Well, what if that person lived halfway across the country and you have to travel? What if I'm closer to my uncle than I am my own brother? Like all of these different situations. And there's rules to say that, you only get this many days bereavement leave. And bereavement is not covered by FSLA or FMLA, the Family Medical Leave Act. I mean, it's not covered by that. Mm-hmm. So people are having to take their personal time for extended leave. And again, so grateful for the university where Sue was working because they granted her this project. Not everybody can do that. And I will say that I do believe that there's a need for the rules or the guidelines in a sense. I think that there's need for it because there are people out there who might be like I was as a teenager. And as a teenager, my grandparents died a lot. So, right.
Yes. So, not coming to school today.
Yes. My grandmother died again. So, which one? Well, the one that didn't die last year, so
yes.
It's just, so I understand why they have to have those guidelines. And I think that organizations need to be a little bit more flexible with that. Like if your child dies, how do you go back to work in 3 to 5 days? You can't.
Jennifer, I want to tell you, you can't. I was not even safely functioning for at least 2 weeks. And I meant like where people weren't watching me.
Yeah.
Because totally distraught, no idea where I was headed, what I was doing, forget about functioning things. And like you said, I happened to be in a position where I was working for myself. So it was different in that regard. But, the things that you talked about, not getting paid for that time and things, my ex-wife and myself had to pay for Jeff's funeral and everything involving in that. So, that's another thing. All these stresses come on and all these crazy things. And it's absurd to think that in 3 to 5 days, someone's going to come back and be normal under, especially under those kind of circumstances.
Yeah.
And most funerals are not done in the first week.
No.
Now, or maybe in a week, but that's 7 days. That's not 3 or 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're expected to function on some level of normalcy. So I started to really look into this and try to figure out, what is it that companies can do? And some of the things that I've seen happen, which I think is just good fellowship, was one company that I worked for, another university that I worked for, a young mother of 2. I think she had children aged like 2 and 6 months. Her husband died in a car crash. And, she's now having to try to figure out how to navigate life as a single parent with 2 young children, etc. And, she really struggled. Well, the people at the university, they pooled, after she exhausted all of her PTO and whatever the university was able to provide for her, the staff pooled their PTO for her, their paid time off.
Wow.
Yeah. And gave her that extended time. And then they also, collected money. They put together things, to make sure that somebody was there to help take care of the lawn or plow the driveway, do things like that, right? To just show the support. So I think that when you have an organization that is open to those types of things, just to help with the support. So I think, you had mentioned something there. I'm just going to kind of deflect over here and talking about, what you had to go through in dealing with the loss of your son. And what's your son's name?
Jeff.
Jeff. Thank you. In dealing with the loss of Jeff and having to manage all of that. And how old was Jeff?
27.
27. So I'm guessing that, Jeff didn't have end-of-life documents in order. No. And it wasn't until just a couple of years ago that I finally decided to get mine in order. And there's still a lot of work that I could do, those minute details. And it's something that I'm preaching often. And every time I do a presentation, anytime I'm in front of a group of people, my last slide is always, or to the end of the slides is always, get your end-of-life planning documents in order now. And it doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter whether you think you have something or not, because, the stats out there is that, for every person who dies, they leave behind, on average, 5 grieving people. Those are the stats. I don't know where they come from. So you have 5 grieving people on average. Well, they're going to grieve. You can reduce the amount of stress by having those documents in order and having your wishes known, because that can go on for years and years. I was doing a presentation at a conference, and somebody that I was sitting with at lunch said, I have to tell you that my husband did have a will, and, he had his financial affairs in order. It's been 4 years, and I'm still dealing with it. And that's somebody who had stuff together.
Yeah. So
that's 4 years that, every time something comes up, it's like, oh, I have to do that. Every time, good luck trying to get somebody's phone canceled if you don't have access to their account, right? So all of these things, I started to kind of open up for me, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is so much bigger. So when we hear of somebody, and we're talking grief as in loss of life, right? There's so many other types of grief, and, the secondary losses and all of that other stuff that goes along with it. But if you're talking about loss of human life, when we hear of it, if you're not in it, it feels very short term, right? It feels like, okay, well, and people put judgments on the timeline, it's been a year already, you should be, or it's only been a year, I can't believe. So there's no timeline to it.
No.
And I think that that's another thing to help folks understand that there's no right or wrong way. Everybody's grief journey is different. It's so complicated and confusing, unpredictable. And I think that that's where it's, my understanding of this now, it's helping me to be a little bit more compassionate. And that's one of the messages that I try to get out there in any of the presentations that I do. It's like, just have a little compassion. So this is all the grief work, right? And this has been, just a little over 2 years that I have started to venture down this road. So within that, again, looking at the construction, going down these other rabbit holes, I started to learn about suicide in construction. Oh my gosh. Construction has one of the highest suicide rates of all industries, 5 times more than the national average. There were some stats that in 2018, and I know they're a little bit older, but in 2018, there were 1,001 workplace fatalities, so workplace accident. There were 5,432 suicides. 5 times the suicides over workplace fatalities. So I'm like, my God, we got an issue here. So the organization, I work for a national trade association, and that association had actually put together a total human health program, and they started to recruit mental health champions and train those mental health champions to be suicide prevention trainers. And it's specifically for the construction industry. So I'm like, yeah, sign me up. Right? I want this. So I've since incorporated that. It's through VitalCog, which is University of Colorado. And I've since incorporated that into that leadership program that I talked about, the Future Leaders in Construction. It's now a required component. We did that last year as the first time as a pilot program. And I'm now requiring that as part of the program. The other area that I got into was the being a mental health first aider, and started looking into mental health issues. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's all so interrelated, right? So when you look at suicide, there's mental health issues that are going on that lead somebody to make that decision, right? It's like they have to be in so much pain that they feel that this is the only way that I know how to relieve and release this pain. So there's got to be these mental health, and this is just me talking, right? But there's got to be that level. So that's a mental health issue. So there's something going on. So we've got mental health issues that are not being addressed. We have an excessive amount of suicides. And then, I was doing a conference, and somebody, I created content called Grief is a Hidden Safety Risk. Doesn't that sound like a fun topic you want to go to at a conference?
It sounds like a construction one, that's for sure.
So I create this workshop or this presentation, Grief, a Hidden Safety Risk. And I've done it at a couple of national conferences. And, I'm like, anytime I get more than 4 people in the room, I'm excited, because this is not a topic anyone wants to hear about. I was at one conference, and a woman approached me afterwards and she said, I have to tell you, because it was mine. And then the other one was workplace mental health. So, great choices there, right? Mm. And one of the women said she overheard a group of it was women in construction. And she said, yeah, they were talking about these are really dark subjects. I don't want to go to either one of them, but I'm definitely not going to the one on grief.
The one they need to be at.
Yeah, the one that they need to be at. So and I understand that. I get that it's not an easy topic to talk about. So when I was at this one conference talking about grief as a hidden safety risk, somebody had approached me afterwards and said, we've been looking for somebody to come and talk to our organization about grief, and they work for recovery-friendly workplaces. It's like, oh, never thought of that. So I got to do research on how grief is related to recovery. And it's fascinating when you think about it. If you're in recovery, think of all of the losses that you have associated with this new path that you're on, right? People don't think about the grief that goes along with that. So I got to do a couple of workshops on taking the discomfort out of grief and working with leadership within those organizations that are recovery-friendly workplaces in New Hampshire. And I get to work with them on, kind of next steps that you can take, how to build a culture that values psychological safety, and looking at psychological safety more than just, being comfortable, maybe challenging the status quo, but looking at psychological safety as it's okay to not be okay. And if you're not okay, know that you can talk to somebody, and you build that culture for people to be able to say, you know what, I'm not having a good day today. Not looking for you to be my therapist, but I just need you to know that if I'm a little bit off, there's a reason why.
Yeah, give me a little space.
Yeah, just give me space. Just keep an eye on me. Because in the construction industry, if you're out in the field and you're distracted, I'm not talking about, being distracted on the phone. I'm talking about, distracted, you have that grief brain, you're a safety risk to yourself and to everybody else around you.
Absolutely. So let me ask you, I got a couple things.
Yeah.
The first one, when you were talking about the suicide aspect and mental health aspect, are you finding, or is there research that's finding, and I think I already know the answer, but would this be more related to the job, like the type of job that it is, or the person coming into the job?
My understanding is that it's the industry. It's a combination of both. I have to say it's a combination of both, right? So there's certain things that within the construction sector, and we're not alone in this. So just, being clear on that. It's not just the construction sector, and I don't want to dissuade anyone from going into construction because it's a viable career. We need people, there's many, many great opportunities. You just want to make sure that you're finding an organization that's, good to work for. So I think within the construction sector, what happens is that there's a lot of pressures that happen in the industry. There's, you've got to be on time, on budget. There's a lot of stress that goes on a construction site. There's this machismo attitude that can happen on a construction site. And, the suck it up, buttercup, leave it at the door. We got work to do. There's also some sectors within the industry, people have to travel. And, you're not necessarily able to make connections, or your family may be, 8 states away and you're not home a lot. So, and there's also something that in my training they refer to as the golden handcuffs. And if, you can make a lot of money in this industry, and you make a lot of money, what do? You buy a lot of fun stuff. If the economy crashes, if there's some kind of a, downturn, if there's something that goes on and, you don't get that big job that you bid on and there's a layoff, now you have these financial burdens. So it's almost like when you have this combination of now I'm a burden to somebody else, and you have this, you have access to the means. So, and those means could be anything. It doesn't necessarily mean access to lethal means, like, guns and things like that. It could be you have access to heights, right? So when you have this combination of, I'm a burden, I can, and all of these other things that get filtered in there, that kind of increases, when that increases the chances of suicide. And again, it's not just in the construction sector. I think that goes across the board when, again, in the little bit of research that I've done on that is that it's just the feeling of loneliness and feeling isolated and feeling like nobody cares, which is not the truth. And we know that. Mm-hmm. I was watching an interview, and I apologize, I can't remember who it was, but there was a gentleman who was a survivor of suicide, and he said, I had people on watch, like I had them calling me, like every 30 minutes, or, he had the system set up. And he said, and yet I still felt like I was alone and nobody cared. And that was a really difficult thing to hear, in this. So that's where, I'm at right now is just, talking about kind of these four areas of, mental health, grief, substance use, and suicide, in hopes that, if one person gets something out of it and, decides to do something or not do something, then I feel that my time is well worth it. So I started a Facebook group before I started my business. I started this Facebook group, and I said to my husband, it was about 2 months in, and I'm not one to, look at numbers and, I don't care how many followers and things like that, right? But I have an open group. The Your Grief Matters is open. I don't want to close it because I want people to find it. I do have to go in on a regular basis to make sure that I don't have spammers in there, and I've had to kick a few people out. Well, I went in one day just to go through my list to make sure that I didn't have any bad people in there. And I looked, and again, this was about 2 months in, and I said to my husband, I was like, wow, I've got 100 people in the group. And then Tom, it was like a wrecking ball coming out of nowhere and just overwhelmed me and took my breath away. I was like, I've got 100 people in here. And I just started to sob. Like, there's 100 people in 2 months time frame that are just looking for something. And it's not, I don't do anything profound. I usually just repost stuff that other people put out there. But I was overwhelmed by that. Like, oh my gosh, there's 100 people. And it's like, wow. Yeah.
You've also come full circle from your grief avoidance into now addressing grief avoidance in society and in the workplace. And, with those 4 people coming to your presentation, proving that, this is our society. And, those 100 people, and I think about this too, because in these circles, and I've talked about this before, where, everything else that I've done, it's performance based, and you're looking at the numbers and you're looking at all those things and comparisons and everything. And in this grief space, it's just not present. It doesn't matter, because there's one person who listens, or one person who hears what you have to offer, or is in that group and sees something that makes them feel good that day. That's what's really mattering, not on the, some grand scale or something like that. Of course, we want it on that too, but the reality is that it's going to be these little snippets of just care for people and trying to break down these barriers that are there, because they're so present and so strong. And you know that better than anybody in the industry you're in. That's the comfortable part of this, kind of, in a way, where we don't have to worry about any of that. It's just get it out there and let it do its work, and it's so freeing to be able to do that. And you can do it with love. You can do it with compassion, because you don't have to worry about, am I being compassionate to this person, but not this person, and all these different things that you go through in your normal thinking of things. And so it's kind of freeing and refreshing in that way. And I think that's healing too,
Yeah. And it's interesting because I'm focusing more on the grief education. And again, it doesn't matter what my topic is, because I've been asked to talk about, certain things, and say, I'm slipping the grief in, whether you like it or not. Like, it's non-negotiable. Talking about Nick is non-negotiable. And, I lost, it was just about a year ago, I lost my best friend from, elementary school.
Sorry.
Thank you. Her name is Becky. And what's interesting, though, is that I absolutely grieve her. I miss her. I still don't feel like I've had that really deep-seated grief. that grief that, knocks you off your seat, that, you just can't breathe. I haven't had that. And I'm grateful for that. I'm not looking forward to the day, and I'm sure that it's about to come. I think that the work that I'm doing and all of the articles that I read and the podcasts that I listen to constantly, I never listened to a podcast before until Nick's death. I like music. That's what I listen to. Never thought of podcasts. And now I listen to them all the time. I'm just constantly trying to absorb. And I think that in that, I think that it's helped me process my own grief with the loss of Becky. I'm okay with it. I feel like I'm okay with, we had this great relationship, and I believe that relationship is continuing, just in a different way. And that's been really, really helpful for me. I never thought about that before. And now that I, get my little signs and whatnot, I'm like, oh, okay, hey, Becky, still talk to her, still feel like she communicates with me. And that brings me comfort. I don't talk about that a lot in my presentations because a lot of people are not, that's a little too weird and woo-woo for them.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But I just think that it's helped me in processing her loss. And, I also my mom has Alzheimer's, and she's starting to progress. So when you're looking at grief, we've been talking about loss of human life, right? That's the big one that everybody assumes when you talk about grief. That's where they go. They might think about pets, but it's always loss of human life is usually where people go. But man, you look at the list of things that we grieve. So I grieve my mom, who's different than she used to be? Absolutely. When she can't remember my name, it's like, okay, doesn't mean she doesn't still love me, So I think that this journey has kind of helped me understand that. So I feel like I'm processing the anticipated loss, that anticipatory grief. I feel like I'm processing that really well because I understand what's happening. And, it just feels like all of these little things are being thrown my way that are helping me to process, I guess, my own grief that I don't really acknowledge.
Very interesting. And I think it brings on a perspective that people need and probably have, and they may feel lost in that because, everybody's saying, well, no, you have to go through it. You have to do it. You have to do all these things. But you're moving forward in a sense and not doing that in some ways.
Yeah.
But I think it's still happening, obviously. You're going through your grief. It's just in a different manner, and you have different safeguards built up for you that, maybe a person out there has that they've been searching the whole time wondering if they're strange, because they don't experience it that way. Wow. I learn something so much every time I do these podcasts. It's amazing. Now your site is yourgriefmatters.co. And so for everybody out there, not com.co, I'll have it in the show notes. What are the things that you're doing that you have available? Or do you do one-on-ones and those things now? Or what do you have available through the site there? Or are you just doing your things within the construction world and things?
I've expanded beyond construction. That happens to be the passion that I have because of the industry that I'm in. I have expanded beyond that. So I've done, work with community service agencies, again, the recovery-friendly workplaces. I did some work with a retirement community. And what I enjoy most is getting to understand what that culture is and kind of tailoring my presentations to that, my workshops to that. I think that that way it makes it a little bit more relatable rather than just, here's my workshop, this is what I do. I don't do anything off the shelf. So I've got a few slides, I've got my Nick slides, I've got a few other things that I keep kind of standardized, but then I want to really bring in the nuances of whatever those industries are. So, I'm looking at eventually creating curriculum for realtors and, first responders, lawyers, like looking at all of these different kind of industries and creating curriculum for them. So My passion, I feel that my drive right now is to do more of the public speaking, to do conferences, love doing the conference presentations, really enjoy going into organizations and doing workshops with organizations. I can do one-on-ones. I don't feel that that's my forte. Usually what I do is I'll have a couple conversations and provide resources, and I do that all for free for individual one-on-ones. I'm there as a resource. I want people to know that they can call, they can reach out. And, I try to take note of particular dates and reach out to people around those dates just to let them know that I'm thinking of them. And this is another really good note that a friend of mine, she lost her sister to suicide on my birthday. And I had reached out to her, and her sister had lost her husband, and her sister was reaching out to me. And I was going to reach out to the sister around the anniversary of her husband's death. And my friend said, we choose to celebrate the good memories. And I thought, wow, thank you for sharing that with me. Because now I know not to send out that card saying, hey, just wanted to let you know I'm thinking of you and I'm here if you need me for anything. I mean, yes, she's going to remember that. But they're really looking to focus on the birthdays and the anniversaries and things like that. It's like, okay. So lesson learned for me, that it's not always, you have to look at both sides of that. So I have kind of this calendar of birth dates, and death anniversaries, I guess as we call them.
Yeah.
And, trying to keep track of that.
It's going to mean so much more to her too, to know that you can relate on her level. So that's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel the same about the one-on-ones. I never went that route. I'm a certified grief educator as well. My squeaky voice. I told you I get a squeaky voice. It might be the atmosphere here today. We had tornadoes in Western New York, which is very rare. Yeah, so it's, the remnants of the hurricane came through, so that's what we got. But anyways, I love your perspective. I love what you have to offer. I think that corporations and companies need to look at it more, obviously, and bring it into their workplace. It is absurd what the regulations are regarding your time off and all of those things. I still have not gone back to the field of work that I was in. And it's just similar to what you were talking about. It's just, I don't, like for Sue, where she couldn't go back to teaching. And something similar for me. I related stories about my family and what I was doing and everything too. So some of that comes into play. Jennifer, I want to thank you so much. It was great. Thank you on short notice too, coming on, squeaking another one in here and all of that. There's a lot more to talk about. I know that, but we're going to finish it up here. So we'll keep in contact, as I say to everybody. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you want to get out to people out there that you want them to know about?
Again, you can see kind of the services that I provide on my website, but really, I guess that my final message, and it's always my final slide and everything that I like to say at the end of any conversation is, just to live every day with your heart filled with kindness, compassion, gratitude, forgiveness, and most important, love.
That is beautiful. And that is all it takes. Thank you again, Jennifer. Appreciate it. Jennifer Landon, everybody. And it is yourgriefmatters.co is her site. And once again, said it'll be in the show notes, of course. And information on her will be there too. So Jennifer, thank you so much for coming on and being part of Heroes in Grief.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for listening to the Heroes in Grief podcast. If you'd like access to any of the links that we discussed in today's show, you can find them in the show notes. There's also a link there to support the podcast if you care to. And there is an email link for me there. I'd love to hear from you and your ideas about the show or what you thought about the show. You really can help out this podcast to get to more people if you subscribe, rate, or review it in whichever way your platform provides. Each week, Heroes in Grief is released on Monday at 6 a.m. Eastern Time, so look for new episodes there. Thank you again for listening to Heroes in Grief.